Two slices of bread and whatever goes between them, that is the entirety of the contract. The sandwich asks almost nothing of the person making it. No oven required, no technique beyond the most basic, no kitchen experience that could not be acquired in 30 seconds. And yet, within those simple terms, across the course of American history, people assembled combinations that were startling, inventive, sometimes alarming, and often surprisingly good. Not every great sandwich looked like one. Not every combination that fed a generation would survive a modern first impression. But the people who ate these sandwiches ate them because they worked, because hunger was real and resourcefulness was necessary, and the bread was there and something had to go between it. Today, we are counting down 10 strange sandwiches that Americans once loved, combinations that were common, regional, beloved, and in many cases forgotten so completely that most people today have never heard of them. Number 10, the peanut butter and pickle sandwich. This combination appears so frequently in the food memories of Americans who grew up in the mid-20th century, particularly in the Midwest and the South, that it cannot be dismissed as an individual eccentricity. The peanut butter and pickle sandwich was a genuine regional standard. Peanut butter spread generously on white bread, with thin slices of dill pickle layered over it, the whole thing pressed together and eaten cold. The logic, once understood, is not strange at all. Peanut butter, rich and sweet and dense, needs something acidic and crunchy to prevent it from becoming monotonous, and the sharp brine of a dill pickle provides exactly that counterpoint, in a way that jelly, the more familiar companion, does not. The combination was particularly common during the Depression years, when both peanut butter and home-canned pickles were among the most economical and shelf-stable foods available. And it persisted in the households that had learned to make it during those years well into the post-war era. Number 9, the mayonnaise and tomato sandwich. Plain, nothing else. The simplicity of this one is what makes it difficult for the modern palate to process as a serious food rather than an ingredient short of completion. A ripe summer tomato, sliced thick, placed between two pieces of white bread spread generously with mayonnaise, finished with nothing but salt and black pepper. No meat, no cheese, no lettuce, no additions of any kind. This was not a poverty food, though it was certainly inexpensive. It was a summer food, the specific seasonal food of the American household with a backyard garden, made at the precise moment when the tomatoes were so ripe that they required nothing beyond the simplest possible presentation. It was eaten at kitchen tables in July and August across the South and the Midwest for generations, and the people who ate it looked forward to tomato season specifically for this, specifically for the morning they could go out to the garden and pick the first fully ripe tomato of the year and come inside and make this and sit down and eat it over the sink because the juice would inevitably run.
Number 8, the fluffernutter. The fluffernutter, peanut butter and marshmallow creme on white bread, was born in New England and spread from there with the determination of a regional tradition that refused to accept that it was regional. Marshmallow creme, a spreadable form of marshmallow invented in the late 19th century and commercially popularized by the Durkee Maurer Company beginning in 1917 under the name Marshmallow Fluff, was a New England pantry staple to a degree that it has never been anywhere else in the country, and the sandwich that paired it with peanut butter was a school luncheon institution across Massachusetts, Maine, and the surrounding states for most of the 20th century. The combination of the dense, savory sweet peanut butter with the light, intensely sweet marshmallow creme produced something greater than a simple sweet sandwich. It produced a texture contrast and a flavor balance that was genuinely distinctive and that children who grew up eating it remembered with a specific, irreplaceable fondness. Efforts to have the fluffernutter declared the official state sandwich of Massachusetts have been made in the state legislature with the seriousness that any genuine regional tradition deserves. Number 7. The olive and cream cheese sandwich. Before catered luncheons became the province of professional caterers and before the sandwich tray was stocked from a deli counter, the sandwiches served at women's luncheons and church socials and the kind of daytime gatherings that mid-century American women organized with considerable social sophistication were made at home by hand according to recipes passed through women's magazines and community cookbooks. Among the most standard of these sandwich preparations was the olive and cream cheese. Cream cheese softened and mixed with finely chopped green olives, spread on thin white bread that had been trimmed of its crusts and cut into triangles or fingers. It was delicate and slightly salty, and the green olive added a briny sharpness that the mild cream cheese needed. These sandwiches appeared on every church reception table and every bridge luncheon spread from the 1920s through the 1960s, and the women who made them did so with the understanding that this was the correct thing to serve on this occasion, with the same matter-of-fact certainty with which the women before them had always known what to serve. When the occasion changed, and the gathering changed, and the standard of the homemade reception sandwich gave way to the purchased platter, this sandwich disappeared with the tradition that had sustained it.
Number 6. The banana and mayonnaise sandwich. This is the second sandwich on this list to feature mayonnaise in a combination that the modern palate finds counterintuitive, and it is the second sandwich whose logic becomes clear the moment you understand where it came from. The banana and mayonnaise sandwich was a staple of rural South from at least the Depression era onward. A ripe banana, sliced or mashed onto white bread spread with mayonnaise, the whole thing pressed together and eaten as a meal. In a region where fresh meat was expensive and where bananas were among the cheapest fruits available at the country store, the banana provided carbohydrate and sweetness and a softness that made the sandwich easy to eat, while the mayonnaise provided fat and a slight acidity and the caloric density that a working body needed. The combination was filling in a way that either ingredient alone could not achieve. It was also, when made with a fully ripe banana and a generous hand with the mayonnaise, genuinely pleasant, the sweetness of the fruit and the richness of the spread, creating something that tasted intentional rather than improvised. Elvis Presley grew up eating this sandwich in Mississippi and Alabama and never stopped. That fact has not made it fashionable. It has simply made it true. Number 5. The horseshoe sandwich, Springfield, Illinois. The horseshoe is not widely known outside of central Illinois, but within the city of Springfield, it is a point of civic pride so intense that any visitor who leaves without eating one has not truly visited. The horseshoe is an open-faced sandwich of considerable ambition, a thick slice of toasted bread on the bottom, topped with a hamburger patty or slices of ham or any other protein of choice, covered entirely with a mound of French fries and then blanketed in a generous pour of cheese sauce, a rich, sharp Welsh rarebit-style sauce made from cheddar and beer and mustard that covers everything on the plate. It was invented at the Leland Hotel in Springfield in 1928 and has been a Springfield institution ever since, eaten at diners and restaurants throughout the city as a meal that makes no apologies for its scale or its richness. The horseshoe was never intended to be delicate. It was intended to feed a working person completely and without ambiguity, and it has succeeded at that intention for nearly 100 years. Outside of Springfield, it is essentially unknown. Inside Springfield, it is simply lunch. Number 4. The Dagwood sandwich. The Dagwood sandwich was not born in any particular restaurant or any particular city. It was born in a newspaper comic strip, the creation of Blondie cartoonist Chick Young, who in 1936 introduced the character of Dagwood Bumstead, making himself towering, multi-layered sandwiches of impossible height as a running visual gag. But the Dagwood became real.
Americans began making their own versions, stacking slices of whatever deli meat was available, whatever cheese, whatever vegetable, whatever condiment, into sandwiches that reached 6 and 8 inches high and required a certain structural commitment to eat. The Dagwood was an expression of post-war American abundance at its most exuberant, the moment when the Depression and rationing were over and the supermarket was full, and the idea of a sandwich that used everything seemed less like excess than like a celebration. It was eaten at kitchen counters and at diner counters by people who found in its excess a specific and genuine pleasure. The Dagwood has never entirely disappeared, but the era when making one was a recognizable act of self-expression has passed. It belongs to a particular American moment, the moment when more was the point. Number 3, the Limburger and onion sandwich. This sandwich requires a moment of courage before the description because Limburger cheese is not a subtle ingredient. Produced from bacterially ripened cow's milk, Limburger develops a rind of extraordinary aromatic intensity as it ages, a smell that has been used as a cultural shorthand for something unpleasant for so long that the cheese itself has been reduced to a joke in the popular imagination. But the people who actually ate Limburger, who grew up eating it in the German immigrant communities of the Midwest where it was a pantry staple, understood something that the joke obscures. The smell and the taste are very different things, and the taste of properly ripened Limburger, creamy, tangy, deeply savory, with a complexity that mild cheeses cannot approach, is genuinely excellent. Spread on dark rye bread with thinly sliced raw onion, it produced a sandwich that was assertive and direct and completely satisfying to the palate that had grown up knowing it. The German-American communities of Wisconsin and Ohio and Indiana ate this sandwich at their kitchen tables and at their tavern lunches and considered it nothing other than normal. The decline of those specific communities as distinct cultural entities through the assimilation of subsequent generations took this sandwich with them.
Number 2, the fried egg and hot sauce sandwich. This sandwich does not belong to any single region, but it appears throughout the food memories of working-class Americans from across the country with enough consistency to deserve its place on this list. A fried egg, cooked in a cast-iron skillet in bacon fat or butter until the edges were crisp and lacy, and the yolk was still runny, or cooked hard if that was the preference, was placed on a single slice of white bread and finished with a generous shake of whatever hot sauce the household kept on hand. In Louisiana, it was Tabasco. In the Southwest, it might be a homemade chili sauce. In Southern diners, it was Texas Pete or Crystal. The hot sauce cut through the richness of the yolk, the fat of the cooking medium, the softness of the bread, and produced a sandwich that was simultaneously simple and satisfying and specific to the household that made it. It was a breakfast sandwich eaten at midnight, or a midnight snack eaten at breakfast, or simply the thing you made when you were hungry and had an egg and some bread and a bottle of hot sauce, which was almost always. It required no recipe. It required almost no skill. It required only the knowledge that this worked, which was the kind of knowledge that traveled by word of mouth and by demonstration, and that has a way of disappearing when the people who carry it stop being asked. Number 1, the tomato gravy sandwich, bread on bread. At the top of this list sits a sandwich that most Americans today would not immediately recognize as a sandwich, that might not immediately recognize as food in the conventional sense, and that was nonetheless one of the most common and most genuinely satisfying things eaten at Depression-era and post-war working-class tables across the South and Appalachia. Tomato gravy was made from canned or fresh tomatoes cooked down in a skillet with a little lard or bacon fat and flour, the mixture thickened and seasoned with salt and a pinch of sugar to balance the acidity, until it became a thick, pourable sauce of deep tomato flavor.
This gravy was poured over a slice or two of white bread placed on a plate, the bread absorbing the sauce as it softened, the tomatoes soaking through until the bread and the gravy became a single object that was eaten with a fork, or in households less concerned with form, simply picked up and consumed. It was called a sandwich in some households, an open-faced preparation in others, and had no name in many of the places that ate it most regularly. It cost almost nothing. It could be made in 10 minutes, and it tasted, when the tomatoes were good and the flour had been browned properly in the fat and the whole thing had been seasoned with attention, like something that had been made for you specifically by someone who understood exactly what your hunger needed. Here is